Trevor Mallard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there are times in this House when I despair, and listening to that member is one of those times. The fact that someone could chair a select committee and not have the ability to do 5 minutes on the broadest debate in the bill. This part, Mr. Chairman, includes subpart 1, which is referendums on the New Zealand flag, and we'll have some speakers on that. Subpart 2, the officials that are involved, and I'm going to reflect on the appropriateness of the behaviour of some of the officials as we get further into the debate. On the roles of electors, whether we have one role, two roles, in the interrelationship with the local body elections, which are involved in the same year. The conduct of the referendums is in subpart 4. The application for inquiry into the conduct of referendums. And I just want to put, I've only got one question on that subpart. I've got multiple on other subparts. Why should the application only be allowed to be made in Wellington? Why should an application for an inquiry into the conduct of a referendum only be allowed to be made in the High Court in Wellington? What is fair about that? I know the government's into closing courts all the way around the country, but why do they say that someone who lives in Auckland, someone lives in Rotorua, do they have a High Court in Whangarei? Probably not, but certainly they do in Hamilton, Dunedin, Christchurch. Why should they not be allowed to make an application under subpart 5 for an inquiry in one of those courts? Interested in the Minister's prompt. There's subpart 6, which members on this side will get back to, and subpart 7, which has to do with advertising. And I say that I was pretty extensively consulted on the question of advertising, especially on the spending limits by my colleagues who sat on the select committee, and frankly it was a fine call around whether there should be limits or not. But the Labour Party came down on balance and only just on the side of having a bit of open slather there. So if the RSA wants to spend quite a lot of money defending the current flag, then that's okay. Part of the problem, of course, is that John Key wants to spend a fortune advertising the 4 alternatives that are going to go up, and he wants to spend nothing of taxpayers' money advertising the current flag. We'll get back to that. And then, of course, Mr. Chairman, in this very broad part are the schedules. And the schedules are where some of the guts of the legislation is. The copy of the ballot paper for the first referendum is in Schedule 1. You know, have we got that right or not? What is the system of randomisation within that? There's quite a big debate, I think, to be had about whether it is better to be consistent or randomised within that. The copy of the ballot paper for the second referendum, and I'd be interested in the ministers, because I haven't quite caught up with that one. Is that randomised as well? Is the current flag and the alternative flag, are they going to be alternated within that ballot paper or not? And if so, what are the reasons for that? The copies of the various forms relating to the process, that is in Schedule 3 of the bill, but, and I want to check my understanding, a nod would do, Mr. Chairman, that in fact Schedule 3 and Schedule 4 are in fact part of this debate and not part of the later debate. Am I correct?
I think so. Oh, no. Yes, they are. Schedule 1. Schedule 2. Schedule 2.
Yeah, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I said at the beginning, this is therefore the area where the Labour Party would like to focus most of the debate, because it is as I say, the substantive part of it. One of the questions I would like to ask goes to the officials who are involved in this, Mr. Chairman.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
It goes to the officials who are involved in this particular piece of legislation, and what appears to be their prejudice as early as the end of last year and the beginning of this year as to the format of the referendum and the spending that was going to be done on it. So well in advance of any budget approval for the referendum, well in advance of any legislation being passed, officials, especially from the Electoral Commission, but also from the Ministry of Justice, were showing their prejudice as to the approach to be taken. Now, if that prejudgment was as a result of direction, and it was justice officials, that's fine. You know, justice officials can be directed, they're part of a department. But it appeared to me, sitting on the cross-party committee, that in fact it was the Electoral Commission officials who had been the subject of direction and prejudice. And if the Electoral Commission officials have been subject of direction, or had showed a party political bias to support the Prime Minister, then, Mr. Speaker, those Commission officials should not be in their jobs.
Order. I just wonder if the member would reflect a little bit on what he's saying and the allegations he's making around partiality of officials employed as public servants in respect of this. It's not easy for them to be able to speak in response to that. And I'll just ask him to be a little measured in his speech.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have thought carefully about what I'm saying. I understand the fact that the officials themselves do not have a response available to them. The State Service Commissioner does, if he thinks it's appropriate on behalf of the state servants to respond. But I say absolutely, sir, as a member of the committee, that there was predetermination from officials in that committee before members of the cross-party committee had come to any consensus at all. We were told that the process was so far down the track in December and January that we did not have the ability to change it. We were told what the budget was to be. And Mr. Chairman, the point that I make is a very deliberate point that I'm making, that if they were the smirking officials from Justice who were involved in it, then, and they were subject to direction, then in fact I understand that, and we will be looking for the direction amongst the papers, because that sort of direction, of course, would have to be a written direction. But as far as the Electoral Commission officials are concerned, there is no ability for a minister to direct them. And if they have shown prejudice, effectively to follow a direction of the Prime Minister without proper authority, then in fact it is my submission that that organisation is the wrong organisation to run a fair referendum on this process. And that, Mr. Chairman, I'm very sad to say, because generally we've had a history in New Zealand of people from the Electoral Commission, people involved in elections being beyond reproach. You know, sometimes I think they spend too much. Sometimes I have doubts about their judgments around interpretations of particular pieces of legislation. But I think they do their job honestly, fairly and without prejudice. I am not convinced that in this process that has occurred. And it's something, sir, I used to be a State Services Minister. I take right to heart the importance of defending public and state servants. I think it is something which is really important, and because they've got to work from government to government. But sir, in this particular case, when we have this particular issue, I think it would ill behove me not to raise the matter in the House, so members are generally aware. And I do look forward to Jonathan Young coming to the House and taking call. I had an email from Jonathan Young yesterday complaining about the fact that I had indicated that the processes in the committee didn't go that well. And he said he didn't have the ability to respond. Well, sir, he has the ability to respond now. And I challenge him to come...
Clayton Mitchell.